mainland. Of animal life, only the birds and the various domesticated species were to be found in the park. Van's instructions were that Eden was to be a garden, and only a garden. No animals were ever slaughtered within its precincts. All flesh eaten by the garden workers throughout all the years of construction was brought in from the herds maintained under guard on the mainland. The first task was the building of the brick wall across the neck of the peninsula. This once completed, the real work of landscape beautification and home building could proceed unhindered. A zoological garden was created by building a smaller wall just outside the main wall. The intervening space, occupied by all manner of wild beasts, served as an additional defense against hostile attacks. This menagerie was organized in 12 grand divisions, and walled paths led between these groups to the 12 gates of the garden, the river and its adjacent pastures occupying the central area. In the preparation of the garden, only volunteer laborers were employed. No hirelings were ever used. They cultivated the garden and tended their herds for support. Contributions of food were also received from nearby believers, and this great enterprise was carried through to completion in spite of the difficulties attendant upon the confused status of the world during these troublous times. But it was a cause for great disappointment when Van, not knowing how soon the expected son and daughter might come, suggested that the younger generation also be trained in the work of carrying on the enterprise in case their arrival should be delayed. This seemed like an admission of lack of faith on Van's part, and made considerable trouble, caused many desertions, but Van went forward with his plan of preparedness, meantime filling the places of the deserters with younger volunteers. 5. The Garden Home. At the center of the Edenic Peninsula was the exquisite stone temple of the Universal Father, the sacred shrine of the garden. To the north the administrative headquarters was established. To the south were built the homes for the workers and their families. To the west was provided the allotment of ground for the proposed schools of the educational system of the expected son, while in the east of Eden were built the domiciles intended for the promised son and his immediate offspring. The architectural plans for Eden provided homes and abundant land for 1 million human beings. At the time of Adam's arrival, though the garden was only 1/4 finished, it had thousands of miles of irrigation ditches and more than 12,000 miles of paved paths and roads. There were a trifle over 5,000 brick buildings in the various sectors, and the trees and plants were almost beyond number. 7 was the largest number of houses composing any one cluster in the park, and though the structures of the garden were simple, they were most artistic. The roads and paths were well built, and the landscaping was exquisite. The sanitary arrangements of the garden were far in advance of anything that had been attempted theretofore on Urantia. The drinking water of Eden was kept wholesome by the strict observance of the sanitary regulations designed to conserve its purity. During these early times much trouble came about from neglect of these rules, but Van gradually impressed upon his associates the importance of allowing nothing to fall into the water supply of the garden. Before the later establishment of a sewage disposal system, the Edenites practiced the scrupulous burial of all waste or decomposing material. Amadon's inspectors made their rounds each day in search for possible causes of sickness. Urantians did not again awaken to the importance of the prevention of human diseases until the later times of the 19th and 20th centuries. Before the disruption of the Adamic regime, a covered brick conduit disposal system had been constructed, which ran beneath the walls and emptied into the River of Eden almost a mile beyond the outer or lesser wall of the garden. By the time of Adam's arrival, most of the plants of that section of the world were growing in Eden. Already had many of the fruits, cereals, and nuts been greatly improved. Many modern vegetables and cereals were first cultivated here, but scores of varieties of food plants were subsequently lost to the world. About 5% of the garden was under high artificial cultivation, 15% partially cultivated, the remainder being left in a more or less natural state pending the arrival of Adam, it being thought best to finish the park in accordance with his ideas. And so was the Garden of Eden made ready for the reception of the promised Adam and his consort. and this garden would have done honor to a world under perfected administration and normal control. Adam and Eve were well pleased with the general plan of Eden, though they made many changes in the furnishing of their own personal dwelling. Although the work of embellishment was hardly finished at the time of Adam's arrival, the place was already a gem of botanic beauty, and during the early days of his sojourn in Eden, the whole garden took on a new form and assumed new proportions of beauty and grandeur. Never before this time nor after has Urantia harbored such a beautiful and replete exhibition of horticulture and agriculture. 6. The Tree of Life. In the center of the garden temple, Van planted the long-guarded tree of life, whose leaves were for the healing of the nations, and whose fruit had so long sustained him on earth. Van well knew that Adam and Eve would also be dependent on this gift of Urantia for their life maintenance after they once appeared on Urantia in material form. The material suns on the system capitals do not require the tree of life for sustenance. Only in the planetary repersonalization are they dependent on this adjunct to physical immortality. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil may be a figure of speech, a symbolic designation covering a multitude of human experiences, but the tree of life was not a myth. It was real and for a long time was present on Urantia. When the Most Highs of Urantia approved the commission of Caligastia as planetary prince of Urantia, and those of the 100 Jerusalem citizens as his administrative staff, they sent to the planet by the Melchizedeks a shrub of Urantia, and this plant grew to be the tree of life on Urantia. This form of non-intelligent life is native to the constellation headquarters spheres, being also found on the headquarters worlds of the local and super-universes, as well as on the Havona spheres, but not on the system capitals. This superplant stored up certain space energies which were antidotal to the age-producing elements of animal existence. The fruit of the tree of life was like a superchemical storage battery, mysteriously releasing the life extension force of the universe when eaten. This form of sustenance was wholly useless to the ordinary evolutionary beings on Urantia, but specifically it was serviceable to the 100 materialized members of Caligastia's staff and to the 100 modified Andonites who had contributed of their life plasm to the prince's staff, and who, in return, were made possessors of that complement of life which made it possible for them to utilize the fruit of the tree of life for an indefinite extension of their otherwise mortal existence. During the days of the prince's rule, the tree was growing from the earth in the central and circular courtyard of the Father's temple. Upon the outbreak of the rebellion, it was regrown from the central core by Van and his associates in their temporary camp. This Urantia shrub was subsequently taken to their highland retreat, where it served both Van and Amadon for more than 150,000 years. When Van and his associates made ready the garden for Adam and Eve, they transplanted the Urantia tree to the Garden of Eden, where, once again, it grew in a central, circular courtyard of another temple to the Father, and Adam and Eve periodically partook of its fruit for the maintenance of their dual form of physical life. When the plans of the material sun went astray, Adam and his family were not permitted to carry the core of the tree away from the garden. When the Nodites invaded Eden, they were told that they would become as gods if they partook of the fruit of the tree. Much to their surprise, they found it unguarded. They ate freely of the fruit for years, but it did nothing for them. They were all material mortals of the realm. They lacked that endowment which acted as a complement to the fruit of the tree. They became enraged at their inability to benefit from the tree of life, and in connection with one of their internal wars, the temple and the tree were both destroyed by fire. Only the stone wall stood until the garden was subsequently submerged. This was the second temple of the Father to perish. And now must all flesh on Urantia take the natural course of life and death. Adam, Eve, their children, and their children's children, together with their associates, all perished in the course of time, thus becoming subject to the ascension scheme of the local universe, wherein mansion world resurrection follows material death. 7. The fate of Eden. After the first garden was vacated by Adam, it was occupied variously by the Nodites, Kutites, and the Suntites. It later became the dwelling place of the northern Nodites, who opposed cooperation with the Adamites. The peninsula had been overrun by these lower-grade Nodites